Hello students, today we will cover chapter number 4, that is ecosystem. We will discuss about ecosystem. And in ecosystem, the various important topic that we are going to cover are: first we will understand what is an ecosystem, what are the characteristics of ecosystem, various components of ecosystem. Then we will discuss about the biotic or living components of ecosystem. Then we will discuss about abiotic or non-living components of the ecosystem, and finally our last topic will be different types of ecosystem. So let's start with this chapter and let's discuss one by one. First, in our earlier classes we have studied that all organisms are adapted to their surrounding where they live. The surrounding or place where an organism lives is called its habitat. So what is a habitat? Habitat is the surrounding or place where an organism lives. Habitat basically provides an organism food, shelter and space to live and reproduce. It means organisms are well adapted to live successfully in their habitats. Now, when several species of plants and animals lives in the same habitat, they form a community. So what is a community? Community is formed when several species of plants and animals live in the same habitat. They collectively form a community. There is a close interaction between the living component and non-living component. Living component को ही हम biotic component बोलते हैं, and we call non-living component as abiotic component. So there is a close interaction between the biotic and abiotic component of the habitat, and the study of this interaction is known as ecology. So what is an ecology? Ecology is the study of interaction between the biotic and abiotic component of the habitat is called as ecology. Then all individuals of a species in a habitat makes up a population. So what is population? Population is formed when all the individual of a species population is formed by all the individual of a species in a habitat. So we have discussed these few terms. That is, first, what is an habitat, then what is community, what is ecology, and what is population. Now let's discuss about who coined these terms, who first used these terms. So first, the term ecology was coined by the German biologist Ernst Haeckel in 1866. Ecology term is derived from the Greek word oikos, which means house, and the term ecosystem was coined by the British ecologist A.G. Tensley in 1935. Okay. Now let's start with our first main topic, that is understanding ecosystem. As we have discussed earlier, that the biotic and abiotic component of an environment or an habitat basically interact and try to maintain a balance between them. Now we will discuss what is actually an ecosystem. An ecosystem is a community of living organisms in a given area or a habitat in which the living organisms interact with each other as well as with their non-living environment components like weather, sun, water, soil, climate and atmosphere. Okay, so I hope this definition is clear. That is, what is an ecosystem? An ecosystem is a community of living organisms in an area or a habitat in which the living organisms interact with each other as well as with the non-living component of environment like weather, sun, water, soil, climate and atmosphere. Okay, now we will discuss what are the characteristics of ecosystem. An ecosystem is an open system. Ecosystem एक open system होता है which requires regular input of energy and circulation of material between the biotic and abiotic components. Okay, therefore an ecosystem has basically three fundamental features. An ecosystem has basically three fundamental features, and what are they? First, interdependence of biotic and abiotic components on each other. Second, energy flow. And third, cycling or exchange of material between the biotic and abiotic components. Okay, now let's move to, now we will discuss what are the various components of an ecosystem. There are two major components of ecosystem. First, biotic or living components, and second, abiotic, that is non-living components. Components of ecosystem. Components of ecosystem: biotic component and abiotic component. In biotic components are further divided into producers, consumers, and decomposers. And these producers mainly includes green plants, consumers animals, and decomposers includes microbes. So in this chapter, basically now we will discuss about all these one by one. So let's start with the first, biotic components. So now let's start with the biotic or living components of an ecosystem. The biotic components of an ecosystem are the life forms like plants, animals, and microorganisms. All these are the life forms. So biotic components are basically the life forms of an ecosystem. The biotic components are further grouped into producers, consumers, and decomposers. Okay, now we will discuss about these biotic components in an ecosystem not only interact with each other and affect each other, but they also interact with the abiotic components also. Okay, so let's discuss first about producer. What are producers? Producers are also known as autotrophs. Producers are also known as autotrophs. Okay, green plants, blue-green algae or cyanobacteria, and some photosynthetic bacteria, they are producers or autotrophs. They produce food not only for themselves but for all other members of the ecosystem. Okay, the producers capture sun's energy during photosynthesis and then they convert into the organic food so that other members of the ecosystem can also use that. During photosynthesis, producers also release oxygen in atmosphere. Okay, and this oxygen is used by all forms of life for respiration and release of energy. Okay, thus we can say that sun is the ultimate source of energy for all living beings on earth. All the nutrients and energy enter the living world through producers. How? Because producers capture sun energy during photosynthesis and they convert into organic food. Now second, consumers. Consumers are also known as heterotrophs. Okay, consumers depend directly or indirectly on producers for their food. All animals are consumers, and the consumers are further divided into three categories. First is herbivores, that is which are also known as primary consumers. What are herbivores? Herbivores are the animals which feed on plants or plant products. Okay, Herbivores are also called as primary consumers or first order consumers. Why they called primary or first order? Because they feed on directly on plants and plant products. Common example of herbivores are or primary consumers are rabbit, deer, mouse, goat, sheep, cattle, horse, etc. Okay. Seed eating birds are also example of herbivores. Now carnivores. Carnivores are also known as secondary consumers. What they do? What are carnivores? Carnivores are the animals which prey upon herbivores or primary consumers. Carnivores that eat herbivores are called primary carnivores or secondary consumers. Okay. Examples of carnivores are snake, frog and small fishes are the example of primary carnivores. Now carnivores which prey upon primary carnivores. Okay, this is important. Carnivores which prey upon primary carnivores are called secondary carnivores or tertiary consumers. You have to remember these terms. Okay. Now a snake which feed on a frog or a wolf preying on a fox, these are the example of secondary carnivores. Okay. Other example of secondary carnivores are peacock, owl, tiger, lion and many fishes. These are also example of secondary carnivores. Now third is omnivores. What are omnivores? Omnivores are the animals that eat plants as well as animals. Such animals are called omnivores. Example of omnivores are crow, human beings and bear. These are the example of omnivores. Okay. Now the third is decomposers. What are decomposers? Okay. Microorganisms like bacteria and fungi, they break down complex organic compound from the dead and decaying remains of plants as well as animals, and the fecal matter also. They break them into simple organic substances. So basically microorganisms do, they break down the complex organic compounds into simple organic compounds. Okay. These microbes absorb some nutrients and release others into the environment. These nutrients then utilized by producers, thus they form a cycle basically. Okay. Now what are transformers? Transformers are the special group of bacteria which disintegrate the simple organic substance into inorganic form. Okay. That are suitable for reuse by producers. The decomposers and transformers plays a very important role in recycling of minerals and nutrients and in maintaining the dynamic nature of the ecosystem. Okay, got it? Now let's discuss about, so far we have discussed about producers, consumers, decomposers, and with decomposers we also discussed about transformers. Okay, now we will discuss about what are the various differences between producers and consumers. Okay, so producers synthesize their own food by photosynthesis, while consumers cannot synthesize their own food. Producers possesses photosynthetic pigment called chlorophyll, while consumers are lacking in photosynthetic pigment. Producers trap solar energy and convert into chemical energy or organic compounds, while consumers are not able to trap solar energy and thus the energy is obtained from outside sources. Next is producers obtained inorganic material from outside for the purpose of photosynthesis, and consumers obtain organic nutrients. Consumers obtained organic nutrients from outside. So these were the four main differences. And now the example of producers: all green plants and some photosynthetic bacteria are the examples of producers, while all animals and some non-green plants are the example of consumers. Now let's discuss about the differences between carnivores and omnivores. First, carnivores. Carnivores feed on other animals, while omnivores eat both plant as well as animal food. Now second, population of carnivores depend on the population of its prey, as they feed on other animals, while the population of omnivores is not dependent upon the population of its prey, because they eat both plant as well as animal also. Examples of carnivores animals are lion, tiger, wolf, etc. And the example of omnivores: man, cockroach, domestic dog, peacock, etc. Okay. Now let's do true and false based on upon the discussion we have done so far. So first, sun is the ultimate source of energy for all living forms of earth. Yes, this statement is true. Second, cyanobacteria are consumers. False. Cyanobacteria are producers. Tertiary consumers prey upon carnivores. Yes, true. All consumers are autotrophs. No, it's a false statement. All consumers, as we have discussed earlier, all consumers are not autotrophs. Actually, they are heterotrophs. Fifth, microorganisms decompose dead parts of plants and animal bodies and clean the environment. Yes, true. Now let's discuss about the biotic and abiotic components of an ecosystem. Okay, there is a give and take relationship between the abiotic and biotic component. What is and how this relationship exists? In this relationship, the abiotic component supply nutrients to producers, and then producers prepare food for themselves as well as the consumers. When producers as well as consumers die, then they are decomposed into simpler substances by the decomposers. Okay, these simple substances then put back into the soil, air or water, which are abiotic components, and thus they are again absorbed by the producers for their food purpose. Okay, thus this cycles repeats over and over, and that's why this cycle is called cycling of matter. What this continuous cycle is called? Cycling of matter. Now on the basis of this is a simpler representation of nutritional relationship among the different components of an ecosystem. This is a general representation. Like from sun, producers make their food and then they are consumed by primary consumers, like in this case herbivores or omnivores. Then this rabbit or these herbivores are eaten by carnivores or omnivores. And when all of these plants, say plant, herbivores, carnivore, omnivores, either they excrete or when they die, then they are decomposed by the decomposers, and from there the simpler substances get back into the abiotic components, which are again used by the producers. Thus this cycle system repeats again and again. Now we will discuss about food chain. Okay, what is food chain? So food chain is the feeding interaction between organisms of different population in an ecosystem. So basically, what is food chain? Food chain is the interaction between the organisms of different population for the purpose of feeding or food. Okay, food chain comprises unidirectional flow of energy in the form of food. ओके एक यूनिडाइक सिंगल डायरेक्शन शो करता है एनर्जी का. हाउ? लाइक फूड प्रोड्यूस्ड बाय प्रोड्यूसर्स, दैट इज ग्रीन प्लांट्स, which are then from producers to consumers through a series of organisms which eat or get eaten by other organisms. Okay, so it's a unidirectional flow. Like producers produce their food, then the producer will get eaten by consumers, and in consumers we have already discussed various different type: primary consumers, secondary consumer, tertiary consumers. Okay, in this way this chain is basically represent food chain. Okay, now we will discuss what are the features of food chain. What are the features of food chain? As we have discussed earlier, sun is the primary source of energy for all food chains. Living beings are depend on one another for their survival. They get food from one another, or they depend on each other. Okay, example, a goat eat grass and man eats goat as meat. Similarly, deer eats plant and is eaten by tiger. This sequence of eating and being eaten forms a food chain. This is a graphic representation. A simple food chain, 3 tropical levels. Like producers, first tropic level, then primary consumer. Here is a example is given of deer. Deer eats producers, and then this primary consumer eaten by secondary consumer. Example is tiger. Okay, so from here we can conclude that we can easily say find out the basic features or the main features of food chain. And what are they? That every food chain begins with producers or green plants. And why? Because they produce food from inorganic molecules. Okay, then animals, also called as consumers, because they consume or eat the food produced by the green plants. Then animal eat plants are called primary consumers and are herbivores. Then these herbivores are eaten by animals which called secondary consumers, and they are carnivores. These carnivores may get it if tertiary consumers are there, then these carnivorous animals are eaten by tertiary consumers. Okay, thus a food chain basically consists of 3 steps, and each step represents a tropic level. Each step represents a tropic level. So here, what are each step? First, producers, which are plants, then primary consumers, which are herbivores, and then secondary consumers, which are carnivores. Tertiary consumers also may include. Okay, thus in a food chain there may be 3 to 5 tropical levels. कितने levels हो सकते हैं food chain में? 3 to 5 tropical levels. The transfer of food energy take place from one organism to another organism at each tropical level. Okay, so you can say that these tropical levels are basically levels that present a particular set of living organisms. Okay, normally at bottom producers will be there, above them herbivores will be there, then carnivores, and then tertiary carnivores, like that. Okay, now all organisms form one or the other tropic level in a food chain. If we discuss about a food chain, then all the living organisms, they will lie at one or other tropic level. Okay, now let's understand this with the help of this graph or this picture. Here 4 tropical levels of a food chain are shown. First, as I already told you, producers will be there. So here, for example, grass is there, producers, then insect will make second tropic level. Insect eats grass, Then at third topic level, frog eats insect, and at fourth, snake eats frog. Okay, so this is an example. Okay, now let's discuss this. Producers, as I already told you, they form the first tropic level. Herbivores normally forms second tropical level. Carnivores third tropic level, and finally top carnivores form the fourth tropic level. Okay, now we will discuss about the, so far we discussed about the food chain. What is food chain? Food chain is basically feeding interaction between the organisms of different population in an ecosystem. Okay, now we will discuss different type of food chain in different ecosystems. Okay, food chain may be different types डिपेंडिंग ऑन द टाइप ऑफ एक फूड चेन किस इकोसिस्टम में प्रेजेंट है उसके बेसिस पे फूड चेन आर डिफरेंट टाइप्स. ओके, सम कॉमन फूड चेन्स बेस्ड ऑन इकोसिस्टम्स आर एज फॉलोज. दीज आर फॉर एग्जांपल ऑफ forest food chain, like grass eaten by deer then get eaten by lion. This is an example of forest food chain. Now aquatic food chain, aquatic plants eaten by small fish, then which get eaten by large fish. This is an example of aquatic food chain. Now then last, grassland food chain, in which grass eaten by grasshopper, eaten by frog, which further eaten by snake, and finally snake get eaten by eagle. Okay, so this is an example of grassland food chain. Now so far we discussed about food chain. Now what is food web? The network of several interconnected food chain. Listen carefully. The network of several interconnected, yani wo food chain which are connected to each other. The network of such food chains is called food web. Okay, the network of several interconnected food chains is called food web. Various food chains in an ecosystem do not operate in isolation. Normally the food chains which we have studied, normally they do not operate separately. These are interconnected. They operate in the form of a food web. Got it? One organism may obtain its food from different sources. It means in a food web, consumers have more than one source of food. Okay, for example, that is, each herbivores usually eat more than one type of producer, and each carnivore prey upon more than one type of herbivores. It's not like that a tiger depends only on deer. A tiger may eat deer also, rabbit also, dog also, like that. So they do not depend on a single source. Okay, the more the number of food chain involved, more stable is an ecosystem. Okay, जितना number of food chains ज़्यादा होंगे एक particular ecosystem में, ecosystem उतना ही ज़्यादा stable होगा. And why this ecosystem is more stable? Because it will not get affected by the loss of one type of organisms. Like in this case, if rabbit say got vanished, in that case it's not like that tiger also get vanished, because tiger is not totally dependent on the rabbit. He may eat other consumers also. Okay, and the same thing you can easily understand from this figure, in which several interconnected food chains which forms a food web has been shown. Okay, so here this is food chain 1A. In food chain A, plants are eaten by rabbit, which is eaten by bird. In food chain B, plants eaten by rat, and rat is eaten by hawk. In food chain number C, plant eaten by rat is eaten by snake, and snake then get eaten by hawk. Okay, now in next food chain, plant eaten by insect eaten by snake or bird, and these two further eaten by hawk. And in food chain number D, plant eaten by bird, bird eaten by snake, a bird eaten by hawk, or bird may be eaten by snake also, which further eaten by hawk. The next, plant eaten by grasshopper, grasshopper may be eaten by bird and which get eaten by hawk, or grasshopper may eaten by frog, frog eaten by hawk. In this way you can see that hawk, basically hawk may eat rabbit, rat, snake, bird, frog. Similarly, snake may also for its food may eat rat or insect or bird, and bird also may eat insect or may get its food directly from plants or may eat grasshopper. So in a food web, this is a basically example of food web, and you can easily understand that a single organism is not totally depend on a single other organism. There are more than one source of food. Okay. So far we have discussed different food chains and in a food web. Okay, now as we have already discussed food chain and also discussed about food web, so now we will discuss about what are the differences between a food chain and a food web. Okay, so food chain is a sequence of eating and being eaten among the living organisms, okay, to transfer the food energy. And while food web is a system of interconnected food chain, means food web basically contain more than one food chains. In food chain there are maximum 4 to 5 tropical levels, while in a food web there are numerous food chain. Food chain is a part of food web, and many food chains collectively make up food web. Food chains do not help in stabilizing the population of endangered species, while food web help in stabilizing the population of endangered species. The disadvantage of food chain is that death of an organism at a particular trophic level cause loss of the subsequent level of food chain. It means if a particular trophic level say get extinct, then the other trophic level which are dependent on the first trophic level, they will also get disturbed, they will also get lost. While in food web, food web provides way different alternative source of food, as a result of which if a particular particular food source get extinct, even then the other consumers will not get affected that much. So these are the basic difference between food chain and food web. Now we will discuss about what are ecological pyramids. An ecological pyramid is a graphic representation, यानी representation in the form of a graph. किस चीज का graph? Of number of individuals, their biomass, or the amount of accumulated energy at different trophic levels in a food chain of an ecosystem. Okay, so basically what is an ecological pyramid? Ecological pyramid is a graphic representation of number of individual, their biomass, or the amount of energy accumulated by them in a food chain at different tropical levels, yani different levels in a food chain of an ecosystem. Okay, so accordingly ecological pyramids are of 3 types. First is pyramid of number, pyramid of biomass, and pyramid of energy. Now we will discuss about this. First, pyramid of number. The pyramid of number shows the number of individuals at each tropical level in a food chain of an ecosystem. Okay, so here is an example of pyramid of number in a grassland ecosystem. So at first tropic level there are producers, second trophic level they are herbivores, at third trophic level they are carnivores, and at the fourth trophic level there is, say, eagle or hawk. Okay. Now pyramid of numbers shows producers from the first trophic level and base of ecological pyramid. They are maximum in number. The number of consumers gradually reduce at each trophic level. Let's understand this from this pyramid here. It shows that number of producers are maximum. So producers are maximum. As we goes on upper level consumer side, the number of consumers gradually decreases. Like the number of producers are maximum, the primary consumers are less than producers, secondary consumers are less than primary consumers, and finally tertiary consumers are less than secondary consumers. Okay, so here the number of consumers, it's saying, gradually reduces at each tropical level from base to top. The primary consumers or herbivores on the second tropical are less than producers already told. Secondary consumers or primary carnivores at third tropical level, and finally the tertiary consumers or secondary carnivores at fourth tropical level become much less in number. That's how it's make a pyramid. Maximum number at the bottom, that are producers number, and tertiary consumers are least, which are at the bottom. Okay, now let's move to the next topic discussion. Okay, now comes interdependence between organisms. Okay, so far we have discussed about ecological pyramids, and in ecological pyramid we discussed that there are three types of pyramids of number, pyramids of biomass, pyramids of energy. Okay, now let's discuss about interdependence of organisms. Animals, human beings and plants shows a fundamental dependence on each other. They cannot flourish without each other. The relation between them is mainly for food, oxygen, energy and protection. For these reasons, organisms are depend on each other. Now one by one we will discuss how animals depends on plants and how plants depends upon animals. First, dependence of animals on plants. How animals are dependent on plants. First, animal obtain food from plants. It means for food animals are dependent on plants. Animal obtain oxygen from plants, which is liberated during the process of their food making or photosynthesis. Okay, then animal gets shade and protection from trees. It means for shade and protection animals depends upon trees. Plants clean our atmosphere by utilizing carbon dioxide and releasing oxygen. For cleaning purpose, for cleaning of our atmosphere, animals depends upon plants. Then plants help in a recycling of matter by obtaining nutrients from dead and decaying matter and decaying excreta of animals. It means plants help in recycling of matter. Okay, now how plants are dependent on animals. Plants obtain carbon dioxide from animal. That is an important constituent, important part of their photosynthesis process. Plants depend on animals for pollination and seed dispersal. Plants obtain nutrients. It means animal provide nutrients from their dead remains to plants. In addition to the above mentioned benefits, all plants and animal derive from each other. There are certain specific interactions between the member of two different species. इसके अलावा भी कुछ specific interactions होते हैं, ठीक है, दो species के members के बीच. Okay, they are called interspecific interaction. उन interactions को हम क्या बोलते हैं? Interspecific interactions. These interspecific interactions are divided into two categories or are classified in two categories. First, positive or beneficial interactions. In this type of interaction, one or both interacting members are benefited. इस type of interaction में क्या होता है, either one or either both of the interacting members of the species, they both are benefit, either one or either both of them. Okay, they include symbiosis, communalism and scavenging. Okay, so we discussed about positive or beneficial interaction, which includes symbiosis, commensalism and scavenging. Now let's move. So next interaction is negative or antagonistic interaction. In this type of interaction, only one of the two interacting member is benefit. Is a positive interaction में one or either one or both of them were benefited, but in negative or antagonistic interaction, only one of the two interacting member is benefited, while the other got harmed. Okay, this interaction include predation, competition and parasitism. Now first is symbiosis, that is positive interactions. What is symbiosis? Symbiosis is a close long-term interdependence of two different species in which both are benefited. It's a type of positive interaction. Thus, in symbiosis, there is a close association between organisms of different species, and there is mutual benefit for both the interacting species. Example. Now let's understand the symbiosis with the help of examples. First is lichens. Lichens में क्या होता है? In lichens there is a fungus and an alga. They live in permanent symbiotic relationship. In this relationship, alga provides food to the fungal partner, while fungal partner provides protection, water and nutrients to alga. And the second example of symbiosis is flower and their pollinators. Bees, butterflies, they gather nectar from the flowers. Bees and butterflies get nectar from the flowers and in turn transfer the pollen from one flower to the other flowers, completing the process of pollination. Thus, on one hand, bees and butterflies are gathering nectar from the flowers, and on the other side, flower get benefit in the process of pollination. Now, we will discuss about parasitism. Parasitism is an example of negative or antagonistic interaction. Okay, parasitism is a negative interaction between organisms of two different species. In parasitism, one organism, usually the smaller of the two, live on or within the larger one and obtain food and shelter. The smaller organism thus benefited and is called parasite. So what is parasite? Parasite is the smaller organism which lives on or within the larger one and obtains food and shelter and thus get benefited is called parasite. The larger one that provide food is called host. Okay, so now it's clear what is parasite and what is host. In this relationship, parasite gets benefited. In parasitism, parasite is benefited by the association. What do you mean by association? Association means that parasite get associated with the host. Host is always harmed and get no benefit. Okay, parasite living on the host's body are called ectoparasites, while those living inside the host's body are called endoparasite. Means those parasites which lives on the body of the host, they are called ecto. Ecto means bahar, while those live inside the host body, they are called endo. Endo means endoparasite, inside the body of the host. Okay, now we will discuss the example of parasitism. First is ticks and fleas. Ticks and fleas lives in mammals' fur, are ectoparasites because they live on the body of the host. They suck blood from the host body Similarly, lice and bugs are also ectoparasites. Okay. Now malarial parasite यानी plasmodium. Example are malarial parasite or plasmodium, tapeworm, tinea, hookworm and roundworm, that is ascaris. All these four are examples of endoparasite. They live inside the body of their host. Their presence is harmful for the host. Cuscuta, amarvale or dodder, sandalwood, santalum tree or orobanchae, and obligate parasite are plant parasite. These are the example of plant parasites. Okay. So now let's discuss about the third relationship, that is predation or predator prey interaction. This is also a type of negative interaction. So what is predation? The interaction between two organisms of unlike species, means species which are not of same type or like, okay, in which one organism hunts and feeds on the other organism is called predation. Okay, clear? In this, organism of one species hunts for the organism of another species and feed that organism. Okay, we call this type of interaction as predation. The organism that captures and feeds, organism that captures and feed, जो capture और feed, capture करके feed करता है, we call that predator, while the other one which one is killed and eaten by is called prey. In predation, strong one attacks and feed on the weak. So example of predation: snake eats a rat, snake eats a rat or a python, swallows a cheetal, hare or deer. In this, snake and python are predators, while rat, cheetal, hare or deer, they are prey. So next example is lion, hyena and wolf. They prey on herbivores like deer, rabbit, etc. Okay. Now, so far we discussed about the biotic components of ecosystem. Now we will discuss about the abiotic components of the ecosystem. The way in which plants and animals grow and carry out their different activities is a result of interaction with the several abiotic factors of environment. So far we have discussed that biotic organisms or living organisms not only depend on each other, but they also interact with the abiotic components. Okay, so there are various type of abiotic components of ecosystem, which are as follows. First, inorganic substances like minerals, phosphorus, sulfur, calcium, sodium, potassium and their compounds. Gases includes oxygen, nitrogen, carbon dioxide and water vapors. Okay, these inorganic substances are basically abiotic components of system. And beside this, these mineral and gases are also involved in the cycling of nutrient in the ecosystem. There are various, beside this there are various physical factors also which are abiotic components of ecosystem. What are they? Air, soil and water. They are also abiotic components. Then climatic factors such as sunlight, temperature, pressure, humidity and wind. These are also abiotic components. Then edaphic factors such as जैसे कि texture of soil, topography यानी different features of land surface. All these are collectively called as abiotic component or non-living component of an ecosystem. Now one by one we will discuss some of these abiotic factors. So first is air. All living organisms need एयर टू लिव. जितने भी लिविंग ऑर्गेनिजम्स हैं सबको एयर की ज़रूरत पड़ती है अपनी लाइफ जीने के लिए. दे ब्रीद इन एयर, दे टेक ऑक्सीजन एंड रिलीज कार्बन डाइऑक्साइड. ओके, प्लांट्स टेक इन कार्बन डाइऑक्साइड गैस फ्रॉम द एयर. दे यूज इट टू मेक देयर फूड एंड release oxygen as a byproduct, which is used by other living organisms for respiration. In this way, plants and animals interact with each other with the help of air. Carbon dioxide is also given off when dead organisms decay and fossil fuels are burnt. This cycling of carbon dioxide and oxygen between biotic and abiotic component is essential to maintain balance in nature. Okay. Now, large scale deforestation by man has disturbed this balance. Deforestation means decreasing or cutting down of forest. So large scale deforestation by man resulted in disturbance of this balance. So there is an increase in carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. Okay. Now let's discuss about the second abiotic component, soil. Soil is one of the most important natural resources. It is essential for majority of plants for anchoring, for absorption of water and minerals for growth purpose. Many animals live in soil by making burrows or holes. Besides this, the nutrient, acidity level, moisture content of soil influence the vegetation or the life of plant. Okay, thus soil plays an important role. Next is water. Water is an essential part of body of all organisms. No organism can survive without water. बिना पानी के कोई भी organism survive नहीं कर सकता. Land plants absorb water from the soil to avoid drying up and use it as raw material during the process of photosynthesis. Besides this, land plants use in order to avoid dry up and during photosynthesis, means for the production of their food. And land animals need water for the movement of material in their body. Besides this, some plants like lotus and water chestnut live in, और कुछ plants तो ऐसे होते हैं जो they just live in water. Among animals, fishes lives in water and breathe through their gills. Fish take oxygen dissolved in water and expel carbon dioxide into water. Okay, so this was about water. Now we will discuss about fourth component, that is light. Sun is the ultimate source of light on earth. Light intensity and its duration control the activity of the organisms. Okay, what is the effect of light on plants? Green plants capture solar energy and use it for making food by the process of photosynthesis. Light also affects opening and closing of the stomata that is present in the leaves, flowering and germination of seed of plants. Indoor plants put in shade for long period shows slow growth. Okay, so plants are much more dependent on sunlight. Okay, so far we discussed about the effect of light on plants. Now we will discuss about the effect of light on animals. Some animals are more active during the daytime. They are called diurnal animals. Example: butterfly, sparrow, crow, pigeon, etc. These are the example of diurnal animals. While other animals which are more active during the night time, we call them nocturnal animals, means night animals. Examples are owl, bat, cockroach, etc. are nocturnal animals. Now the next component is temperature. Temperature affect various activities of living organisms. Most animal grows and survive within a range of 0 to 50 degrees Celsius. Some microorganisms have ability to survive at very high temperature or at a very low temperature. Okay. Now, some animals and plants are found in cold regions. For example, penguins are found in Antarctica and pine trees on the slope of Himalayas. Okay. On the other hand, camels lives in places with high temperature. Leaves of desert plants become spiny to control the water loss. Some animals like lizard, frogs, snakes, etc. they underground in winter season. Okay, this is called winter sleep or hibernation. During this period they are inactive. Similarly, snails and frogs undergo summer sleep or estivation to avoid summer heat. Okay, in this way hibernation and estivation both are opposite, as hibernation or is called winter sleep and estivation or it's called summer sleep. In hibernation, animals undergoes in say animals of cold areas, they got underground in winter season, while in estivation or summer sleep, some animals like snails or frogs, they go underground in order to beat the summer heat. Okay, now next component is 6 is humidity. Atmospheric moisture in the form of invisible vapors is known as humidity. Means the moisture that is present in our atmosphere in the form of invisible vapor, we call that atmospheric moisture as humidity. Humidity is greatly influenced by the intensity of solar radiation, temperature, altitude, wind, water status of soil, etc. Humidity is greatly influenced. These are the factors which greatly influence the intensity of humidity. These are the factors. Like low temperature cause high relative humidity by decreasing the capacity of air for moisture. अगर temperature low होगा तो humidity high होगी. Biological processes such as transpiration, absorption of water in plants, etc. are influenced by atmospheric humidity. Okay, therefore humidity plays an important role in life of plants and animals. Now next is wind. Moving air is called wind. So what is wind? Moving air is called wind. It is a vital environmental factor. It affects plants and animals and even microorganisms को भी ये प्लांट एनिमल और माइक्रो ऑर्गेनिज्म इन सबको अफेक्ट करते हैं, प्रभावित करती है. इट मॉडिफाइज वाटर रिलेशन एंड लाइट कंडीशंस ऑफ ए पर्टिकुलर रीजन. विंड जो है वो बेसिकली एक पर्टिकुलर रीजन की वाटर से रिलेटेड एंड लाइट से रिलेटेड कंडीशंस को चेंज करती है. ए नंबर ऑफ फिजिकल, एनाटॉमिकल एंड फिजियोलॉजिकल चेंजेस इन प्लांट्स आर इंट्रोड्यूस्ड बाय विंड. सच चेंजेस इंक्लूड ब्रेकेज एंड अपरूटिंग ऑफ प्लांट्स, डिफॉर्मेशन, इरोजन एंड डिपोजिशन. जो विंड है वो डिफरेंट टाइप ऑफ चेंजेस कॉज कर सकती है. चेंजेस कैन बी फिजिकल, एनाटॉमिकल मीन्स विद इन द प्लांट, फिजियोलॉजिकल चेंजेस इन द प्लांट्स. सच टाइप ऑफ चेंजेस मे बी कॉज्ड बाय विंड. एग्जाम्पल्स, ब्रेकेज, विंड की वजह से ब्रेकेज हो सकती है और प्लांट्स की अपरूटिंग हो सकती है, प्लांट पेड़ पौधे उखड़ सकते हैं. डिफॉर्म यानी चेंज इन देयर शेप, और इरोजन एंड डिपोजिशन दे मे ऑल्सो हैपन एज ए रिजल्ट ऑफ विंड. विंड एसेलरेट्स ट्रांसपिरेशन यानी रेट ऑफ ट्रांसपिरेशन को इंक्रीज कर देती है विंड बाय रिमूविंग मॉइस्चर एंड काज सॉइल इरोजन एट ए वेरी हाई वेलोसिटी. ओके, द इरोजन रिमूव्स रिच ऑर्गेनिक मैटर फ्रॉम द सॉइल सरफेस. और जब सॉइल का इरोजन होता है उसका सबसे बड़ा ड्रॉबैक क्या है कि जो रिच ऑर्गेनिक मैटर है सॉइल के सरफेस पे जो प्रेजेंट है, सॉइल इरोजन की वजह से वो रिमूव हो जाता है. ओके, और एंड एक्सेसिव ट्रांसपिरेशन की वजह से क्या होता है? एक्सेसिव ट्रांसपिरेशन लीड्स टू डेसिकेशन एंड डेथ ऑफ द एपिकल मेरिस्टेम. बेसिकली एक्सेसिव ट्रांसपिरेशन की वजह से क्या होता है कि ये जो ग्रोइंग जो एरियाज़ होते हैं प्लांट्स के, जैसे टिप्स ऑफ शूट्स जहाँ पे न्यू ग्रोथ रहती है, बेसिकली उसको ये डेसिकेशन ड्राई अप कर देते हैं, जिसकी वजह से दीज ग्रोइंग पार्ट्स उनकी डेथ हो जाती है. द एंड रिजल्ट इज ड्वार्फ प्लांट्स. ओके, जिसकी वजह से जिसका रिजल्ट क्या होगा कि जो प्लांट है वो प्रॉपर्ली ग्रो नहीं करेगा, हाइट में छोटा रह जाएगा, उसकी नंबर ऑफ ब्रांचेज लेकिन ज़्यादा होंगी क्योंकि वो वर्टिकली ज़्यादा ग्रो नहीं कर पा रहा है, और द लीव्स विल ऑल्सो बी स्मॉल. ओके, नाउ ड्यू टू हाई वेलोसिटी winds, the sand particles are blown and are deposited on the leaf surface that reduce photosynthesis and causes rise in temperature and rapid desiccation. इसके अलावा हाई विंड वेलोसिटी की वजह से जो लीफ का जो सरफेस होता है उस पर सैंड की लेयर जम जाती है, सैंड डिपॉजिट हो जाता है. और एज वी नो दैट लीफ आर द मेन पार्ट विच प्लेज वेयर द विच कैरी आउट द प्रोसेस ऑफ फोटोसिंथेसिस. अब as the leaf surface is covered, so the process of photosynthesis will not occur properly, as a result of which transpiration also will not happen, and thus temperature and rapid dryness will be resulted. Okay, now let's discuss last topic of this chapter, that is different type of ecosystems. Ecosystems जो हैं, they can be broadly divided into two category. First is terrestrial ecosystem and second is aquatic ecosystem. Now what is terrestrial ecosystem? Terrestrial ecosystem is basically related to land. The ecosystem which exists on land is called terrestrial ecosystem or land ecosystem. Okay, so depending upon the type of habitat, terrestrial ecosystems may further be divided into or further may be categorized into forest ecosystem, grassland ecosystem, and third one is desert ecosystem. Okay, now the second is aquatic ecosystem. What is an aquatic ecosystem? What are aquatic ecosystems? Aquatic ecosystems are freshwater, maybe freshwater ecosystem and marine ecosystem. They are of these two types. Okay, so what are fresh water ecosystem? Fresh water ecosystems are pond, lake and river ecosystem. Basically the ecosystem of fresh water and is called freshwater ecosystem, and where we found freshwater in ponds, lakes or and river. And marine ecosystem, where it exists? It exists in sea, seashores and estuarine ecosystem. These are example of marine ecosystem. Okay, now we will discuss first forest as an ecosystem. We will discuss about forest as an ecosystem. Okay, a forest ecosystem is formed of biotic and abiotic component. जैसे हर एक इकोसिस्टम बना रहता है बायोटिक, लिविंग एंड नॉन लिविंग कंपोनेंट्स से, सिमिलरली फर्स्ट इकोसिस्टम भी बायोटिक एंड एबायोटिक कंपोनेंट से बना होता है. वाइल्ड प्लांट्स एंड एनिमल्स एंड माइक्रोब्स जो हैं एक फॉरेस्ट के अंदर, दे फॉर्म द बायोटिक कंपोनेंट ऑफ द फॉरेस्ट इकोसिस्टम. Okay, so these plants, animal, microbes are biotic component. They are producers, consumers and decomposers. Plants, producers, animals, consumers and microbes, decomposers. Okay, now we will discuss about producers in forest ecosystem. What are producers in forest ecosystem? Green plants are the producers. A forest has एनुअल प्लांट्स. व्हाट आर एनुअल प्लांट्स? जिनका लाइफ स्पेन जो होता है वो 1 ईयर का होता है. वी कॉल देम एनुअल्स प्लांट्स. ठीक है, दे आर नॉर्मली हर्ब्स आर एग्जांपल्स ऑफ दिस. बायएनियल प्लांट्स, जिनका की जो लाइफ स्पेन जो होता है वो 2 ईयर्स का होता है, उनको हम बायएनियल प्लांट्स बोलते हैं. देन पेरिएनियल प्लांट्स, वो प्लांट्स जो कि सर्वाइव करते हैं सेवरल ईयर्स के लिए. एग्जांपल ऑफ सच प्लांट्स आर क्लाइंबर्स, lianas, shrubs and trees. These are example of perennial plants. अच्छा, then layers in forest. एक forest के अंदर क्या कौन कौन सी layers होती हैं? The trees in a forest are, एक forest के अंदर जो trees होते हैं, they are of different shapes and heights. The branching part of a tree above the stem is called crown. Okay, तो जो वो पार्ट ट्री का जो स्टेम से ऊपर का वो पार्ट, ट्री का वो पार्ट जो कि स्टेम से ऊपर होता है, जहाँ ब्रांचिंग रहती है, ब्रांचेज निकली रहती हैं, उस पार्ट को हम क्राउन बोलते हैं. ठीक है, और इसमें बेसिकली ब्रांचेज एंड लीव्स कवर्ड होती हैं. These crown are of different type and size in a forest and form several horizontal layers in a forest. Okay, now we will discuss about this layer. The topmost layer formed of crown of leaves of tall trees is called canopy. जो tall trees होते हैं, ठीक है, जितने भी tall trees होते हैं उनकी जो टॉपमोस्ट लेयर होती है उसको हम क्या बोलते हैं? कैनोपी. ओके, द मिडल लेयर जो है उसको हम द मिडल लेयर जो कि बेसिकली जिसके अंदर क्या क्या कवर होते हैं? श्रब्स एंड टॉल ग्रासेस, उसको हम क्या बोलते हैं? अंडर स्टोरी. दिस इज अंडर स्टोरी. ओके, एंड जो ग्राउंड सरफेस ऑफ फॉरेस्ट विच इज कवर्ड बाय विद फॉलन लीव्स, फ्रूट, सीड्स, ट्विग्स एंड स्मॉल स्मॉल हर्ब्स एंड फंगाई, they constitute the forest floor, यानी floor part. Okay, So basically the forest layer, you can divide forest layer into three parts. Canopy, that is formed by the crown of canopy is the topmost layer made up of crown leaves of tall trees. Then middle part made up of shrubs and tall grasses, we call that understory. Then the lowest part, which is made up of fallen leaves, fruits, seeds, twigs, herbs, etc., we call that floor of the forest. Okay, so first we discussed about producers, different type of plants and layer in a forest. Now we will discuss about consumers. Okay, now consumers, जो एनिमल और जो नॉन ग्रीन प्लांट्स हैं ये मिलके कंज्यूमर्स बनाते हैं. ओके, कंज्यूमर्स में क्या क्या इंक्लूड होते हैं? हर्बीवोर्स, जो कि हम पहले ही जानते हैं, दे आर प्राइमरी कंज्यूमर्स. एग्जांपल आर डियर, चिंकारा, गोट, बाइसन, एलिफेंट एंड पैरेट एसेट्रा. सेकेंड है कार्निवोर्स. कार्निवोर्स, दीज आर द सेकेंडरी कंज्यूमर्स. वी ऑलरेडी डिस्कस्ड अबाउट दिस. एग्जांपल्स आर टाइगर, लायन, पैंथर, फॉक्स, हॉक. Then they are omnivores, which eat both plants and animal. Okay, their examples are crow, bear, etc. And then finally scavengers. Scavengers क्या होते हैं? Scavengers basically वो क्या basically करते क्या हैं? They basically eat animals and the leftover of the carnivores. ठीक है, ये leftovers इन सबको जो बचा हुआ है या कोई एनिमल डेड होगा ये उनको खाते हैं. Examples are hyenas, jackal and vulture. So these are consumers in a forest ecosystem. Now we will discuss about decomposers. Okay, fungi and bacteria are the decomposers for the forest ecosystem. Forest ecosystem के लिए decomposers का काम कौन करते हैं? Fungi and bacteria. Fungi, they decompose and destroy the dead remains of the plant. Decomposers का basic काम क्या होता है? Decompose करना होता है. ठीक है, चाहे वो प्लांट्स का हो या एनिमल्स का हो. एंड इन दिस वे दे ब्रेक डाउन द कॉम्प्लेक्स मटेरियल इनटू सिंपल मटेरियल एंड दस दे रिटर्न द न्यूट्रिएंट्स टू द सॉइल एंड हेल्प इन द फॉर्मेशन ऑफ ह्यूमस. एंड व्हाट इज ह्यूमस? ह्यूमस इज द टॉप लेयर ऑफ द सॉइल which provide nutrients. Okay, now the abiotic factors such as humidity, light, altitude, wind speed, abiotic such as humidity, light, altitude, wind speed and temperature affect the type of plants and animals found in a forest. ये सभी मिलके थोड़ा थोड़ा कुछ ना कुछ जो डिफरेंट टाइप को जो प्लांट एंड एनिमल एक फॉरेस्ट के अंदर पाए जाते हैं उनको प्रभावित करते हैं, अफेक्ट करते हैं. फॉर एग्जाम्पल कॉनिफर्स एंड फर एनिमल्स आर फाउंड इन फॉरेस्ट एट हाई एल्टीट्यूड. वो फॉरेस्ट जो हाई एल्टीट्यूड पे हैं उन फॉरेस्ट में बेसिकली कॉनिफर्स और फर एनिमल्स पाए जाते हैं. वाइल इन कोल्ड क्लाइमेट, हाई एल्टीट्यूड एंड कोल्ड क्लाइमेट. ओके, ये बेसिकली इस एग्जांपल में क्या मेंशन कर रहा है कि वो फॉरेस्ट जो हाई एल्टीट्यूड एंड कोल्ड क्लाइमेट में एग्जिस्ट करते हैं उन फॉरेस्ट में कॉनिफर्स एंड फर एनिमल्स पाए जाते हैं. जबकि जो रेन फॉरेस्ट है उसमें जो लीव होते हैं वो जो ट्रीज पाए जाते हैं दे हैव ब्रॉड लीव्स. Okay, so what we have discussed so far in here, first we discussed here different type of ecosystem types, that is terrestrial ecosystem and aquatic ecosystem. In terrestrial ecosystem we discussed we read about the type of three types, that is forest ecosystem, grassland ecosystem, desert ecosystem. And aquatic is ecosystems के types में हमने we discussed about freshwater ecosystem and marine ecosystem. And then we discussed in detail about forest as an ecosystem. Okay, in forest as an ecosystem we discussed first what are the producers in forest ecosystem, then what are consumers in forest ecosystem, and what are the decomposers in forest ecosystem. Thus we have completed this chapter. Thank you.